My name's Travis Albert. I've started a number of different social reading startups. Book Glutton was one of them. Read Social was another. And we actually have a new project called Readups. So continuing in the vein of developing and refining the same ideas. My interest really lies in the social discussion layer that exists on top of ebooks and how that can be improved.
Well, my name's Aaron Miller, and I've worked on a number of projects. I've been developer on Book Glutton, on Read Social, on Readups, and I currently run technology for a company called NetGalley, which is owned by Firebrand. And I'm also a writer. I've written a novel and a collection of stories. I've always been interested in the web as a medium for creative writing as well as other kinds of writing.
The first project we built that we talk about in the book is Book Glutton. And Book Glutton was a destination site where you'd go and you would create a group, and then you would import a book, and then that group would discuss it. You could chat in real time, and you could attach notes. The progression was then Read Social. We built a system where anybody could put these social features inside their content. And so that's an API, and you integrate that into your iPad app or your ebook file or your website, and people can attach a comment to any paragraph and respond. And what's significant about that is people can log in from all kinds of different services. So they could be logged in from Twitter or Facebook and still connect inside this. And it also enabled publishers to integrate these features. That was a really interesting concept because, as the chapter's entitled, it's above the silos. So it breaks people out of their social network. You know, if someone from Twitter and someone from Facebook can connect. And it also breaks you out of your content silos because this system works across different, iPad apps and websites. And then the newest piece that we've launched is called Readups. And the idea behind that is that you meet up inside a book. So Read Up is essentially the concept behind it. And what's different with this one is we've added a time-based element to it. So it's a little bit like Book Glutton. You go to a website, you add a little bit of content, and it gives you a URL, and then you can share that with whoever you want to read with. But when you create that, you also decide how long you want that to exist. And when it expires, the conversation disappears. So it's kind of an ephemeral, temporary conversation that exists in the moment as like a group experience rather than something that's to be archived forever. Not that we have anything wrong with archiving social conversations. Obviously, we do that with Read Social and we like it, but there are these very small nuances between time and how people connect and what systems they're on make a big difference once you really start using it. So not sure where I'm going with that, except for that it's been really interesting to be able to build on this progression of different social ideas and see how people use them differently.
Well, one of the key differences between Book Glutton and Readups was that Book Glutton had actually featured authors and publishers, and it was more of a publishing system where they could put content in, and it was meant to kind of stay there, available all the time in a bookstore or just for free. With Readups, we wanted to focus more on the groups that had specific events that they wanted to participate in for a limited time. So Readups is less of a publishing system in the sense that when you put content into Readups, it's not going to stay there for very long. It's only going to be there as long as you need it to be there to participate. So you can do a Readup that lasts 5 days. You can do a Readup that lasts 2 weeks. You can make one that lasts 55 days. But at the end of the time period, that content is gone from the web. It disappears. And now we've talked about allowing people to extend that, but the central focus is the event and the group of people that are interacting with each other, rather than trying to make the content available in a certain form or for a certain time period.
Groups are a very key aspect of what we talked about in the book. It's something that is often overlooked, particularly by publishers. As I was saying before, really publishers need to start to try to develop that audience and encourage it in certain directions. But with Book Glutton, the groups were primarily people you invited by email. With Read Social, we used hashtags to create the groups. So they were more free form. Whoever knew the hashtag was essentially in that group. And then with Read Ups, the group is whoever you share that URL with. So different approaches to the group idea, but it's a really central key, for social reading. There are a few reasons we add the time element. It is true that people do speak differently if they know it's being saved forever versus if it's only going to be there for a certain amount of time. So that is true. The idea that we wanted to encourage casual conversation. But there are a couple other reasons as well. Erin actually wrote a really good article called "The Self-Destructing Work of Art." And it talks about how not everything you do online needs to last forever. And he can interrupt me on this if he wants, since I am talking about your writing piece. But I thought it was a really cool idea because, we generate so much content in our online life. And sometimes we say things that are brilliant. And other times we just say things to have a conversation, and it's not as important, and we just want to accomplish this goal of discussing and learning things. And so I think that that's the sort of idea that we wanted to embrace, the idea that we want people to be able to have this discussion comfortably and say what they need to say, and then it can go away, and it doesn't have to be archived. It doesn't have to follow them around their whole lives. Do you have something
Right.
you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, one of the things that we ran into with Book Glutton was when we published authors, often they would want to republish that work somewhere in print, for example. And they would come back to us and they didn't want it on the web at that point. So when they put it up, they might have wanted to see what kind of discussion it generated, but they don't necessarily want it to be archived, either the discussion or the content itself. And so that was kind of one of the reasons for creating Read-Ups too, was that there are a lot of use cases where writers in particular, and I've been in this situation as a creative writer, where you're sort of workshopping material and you want to bounce it off other writers, and maybe they're on another part of the globe, but you don't necessarily want it to be archived forever along with their comments, because you may do further revisions or take it to an editor, or you may want to republish it somewhere else and preserve those rights and not have it existing all the time on the web. And so that and some of the educational use cases are some of the big reasons that we wanted to create Read-Ups. A place to allow people to discuss writing in a non-permanent way. We think that's really useful, and it's something that the web does really well. Not everything on the web has to seem like it's there forever.
It's not by accident that we call it a meetup, a meetup is a read-up, is like an event that takes place offline and online. One of the things that we touch on a little bit in the chapter is the idea that groups are most successful when they have an offline component and an online component. Those are the strongest groups. We see the most comments from those people. And so education is a really natural user for Read-Ups. Those people meet in person, but then they'll have a homework assignment perhaps where the teacher will go in and leave comments on different aspects of the text, and then tell students they have to answer 3 of those questions or respond to 3 of those comments. So encourage this asynchronous communication that's taking place outside of the classroom and then reinforced when they get back into the classroom.
Yeah, the component of people meeting in the real world with, particularly with somebody like a teacher who can direct or focus the effort on the content itself, is a really important foundation for group activity around content. We've seen a lot less success with content that's just out there available to everyone without any kind of focused effort that's directed by somebody, and particularly without any kind of physical relationship between people, a place where they can meet outside of the virtual space as well. And so it's been, I think, really useful to have read-ups as a kind of a new iteration of some of these ideas of ours, and to see that being kind of confirmed.
How's the result so far?
It's been really positive. We continue to look back on these ideas that conversation does need to be guided and facilitated. People need sometimes recommendations about what to discuss or some guidance about how to discuss it. And they also need to have some sort of relationship with who they're reading with. It matters who's in your group. When you read with everybody, it's quite different than reading with 10 people you know, or your colleagues from work, or your classmates. And so, the project is very young. It's only been live for a couple months, so we don't have a lot of results, but the groups that are being creative have been incredibly active. And so if you see that many comments coming out of each read-up, we think that's a very good sign.
One of the things that we've seen that we kind of conjectured about at first and wanted to confirm was that privacy is often very important to these groups. And we've seen our users putting passwords on the read-ups and sharing those only with the group, because we suspected that it might be important for them to not want the whole world to have access to these discussions. And in fact, that's seen as very useful to them, I think, because it reinforces the group itself as a kind of a separate group from the larger group of the internet.